And once they start recording, Tarang, you can start.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I, Tarang Jha, will be the host for the day, and it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome here our speaker of the day, VP Raja sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I welcome Mr. Julio Ribeiro, sir, Trustee of Public Concern for Governance Trust, our Principal, Dr. Meenu Madlani, ma'am, our Vice Principal of Degree Section, Ms. Chandrakala Joshi, ma'am, and all the dignitaries and attendees present here today. I, on behalf of Public Concern for Governance Trust, in association with Hinduja Model United Nations, would like to welcome you all to this webinar on the topic Ethical Dilemmas of the Civil Servant. Now, I would like to introduce our institutions. Public Concern for Governance Trust, PCGT, is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro, sir, Dr. R.K. Anand, sir, and late Mr. B.G. Deshmukh, sir, to increase public participation and activism towards creating a more transparent and efficient governance system. In order to sensitize and mentor the youth in ethical values with an emphasis on good governance, PCGT started the Youth for Governance program in the year 2012. Previously, PCGT has organized dialogues, workshops, and webinars as requested by the campus ambassadors on issues that are related to good governance and involving eminent speakers and role models in different fields to guide and inspire the youth. Now, I would like to introduce K.P.B. Hinduja College of Commerce. K.P.B. Hinduja College of Commerce was founded in 1974 by the visionary industrial late Shri Padmanand Deepchand Hinduja. K.P.B. Hinduja College of Commerce is recognized as one of the premier academic institutions in Mumbai and has the ISO 9001 certification. It received the Best College Award for the year 2010 and 11 from the University of Mumbai. In 2017, the college was re-accredited in third cycle by NAC and awarded A+ grade. Hinduja Model United Nations is the first of its kind in our college, and we aim to involve you all in the issues that are haunting the world at present and provide solutions for the same. It's a platform for people to showcase their talent and meet like-minded people. People can give their thoughts a voice and provide capable solutions to solve world problems. I request Ms. Chandrakala Joshi, ma'am, to please address the gathering. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Wait, I'll unmute, ma'am. Just a minute, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Shri VP Raja sir, Shri J.F. Ribeiro sir. It's a matter of pride for our college to be able to make this webinar possible in association with PCGT and having Shri VP Raja sir as our guest speaker in presence of Shri Ribeiro sir. When I was made aware of the agenda for today's webinar, I knew that our students will be having a very productive time listening to our speaker. It is very important for young minds to be able to listen to those who have already been in the field and experienced the realities of it. It is quite often that we as professionals have to face different situations where we have no option but to choose between a few options and are often left in an ethical dilemma as the topic suggests. And it becomes as difficult when you are actually have to decide between your duty and the contradictory option that is placed before you. I believe webinars like these develop us as good citizens that we ought to be and help us to become more responsible towards the society. At the end, I congratulate the entire team of Hinduja Model United Nations for having conducted a successful conference and also to make this webinar possible for our students. I express my sincere gratitude towards Raja sir and Ribeiro sir for their inputs. I'm extremely thankful to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your kind words. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker for the day, Mr. V.P. Raja, sir. After obtaining two postgraduate degrees in physics from Delhi University and Columbia University, respectively, Sir joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1974. As an IAS officer of the Maharashtra cadre, he has worked in various assignments at the district, state, and center. In recognition of his outstanding contributions to administrative reforms while working as collector of Satara and as Transport Commissioner of Maharashtra, Mr. Raja Sir was awarded the Distinguished Government Administration Award. With the Government of India, he worked at the Ministry of Human Resource Development, the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Defense, and at the Department of Atomic Energy. Thereafter, he was the chairman of the Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission for a period of 5 years till he attained the age of 65. Concurrently, he was also chairman of the Expert Appraisal Committee of the Ministry of Environmental and Forests of the Government of India for appraising of new projects for coal mining and thermal power projects from the point of view of their environmental impacts. He has a passion for teaching, coaching, and mentoring young students. He is a visiting faculty both at the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, University of Mumbai, and at the BSc Institute of the Bombay Stock Exchange, teaching courses centered on statistics, business research, and quantitative methods and economics. A request to all the attendees to kindly type in your questions in the chat box directed towards questions@Tanmay. We shall accommodate these questions towards the end of the session. Also, it is recommended for all the attendees to keep their videos on and microphones on mute at all the times. Now, I would welcome our speaker, Mr. V.P. Raja, sir, to take over. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dimple, for your kind words of introduction. I'm also grateful to the Hinduja College of Commerce, the principal, the vice principal, all dignitaries, and my fellow trustees, students, staffers from PCGT, and everybody here. The subject which I've been requested to discuss is ethical dilemmas of a civil servant. Of course, by definition, a civil servant is called upon to take decisions or sometimes recommend decisions for somebody above you to take. So obviously, when you take a decision, there are many decisions where, there are no issues of right or wrong. You have to come to a judgment. While there are some decisions which is a clear no, because decisions have to be taken within the rule of law. Sometimes immediately you have to take a decision. There's not even a few minutes given for you to hesitate, because it could cost a lot of other problems or even lives, human lives. So if I were to narrate these kinds of situations, it can be a very long list. What I propose to do is to narrate a few of them and try to discern something that we can perhaps infer, or with hindsight I can now infer, having spent over 40-45 years in public service. When I look back, some of the dilemmas that we face, the source of the dilemma is yourself. That is, it's not only people in the civil service. The moment we go through get our degrees or get some professional degrees, maybe we become a very good engineer, we become a very good doctor, we become a good IAS officer. we have gone through a fair amount of competition before getting into that. And for people like in the civil service, we are also formally trained at a place called the National Academy of Administration at Missouri. And it is kind of pumped into your head that you're the brightest, the cream de la cream. So, your ego gets boosted up quite a lot. And that itself can become a source of problem later on. While I give some examples, I will explain that. So I will say some of the ethical dilemmas, you're the source. Those dilemmas would not have occurred had you been humble, had you not thought too much about your own abilities, had you not looked down upon people who did not have the same kind of education or background that you have. A second common thing is, if you're fair to the best of your ability, that is, whenever you're facing a dilemma, there is something called the inner voice. You do apply your mind for whatever the short period it is. And the inner voice tells you this is the right thing to do. And follow that inner voice. I mean, don't have other things cloud your thinking. So I am normally found to be fair, to be fair-minded, to be transparent, to be open, not to have any personal agenda, not to ask questions in your mind like, if I do this, what will happen to me? These kinds of things. Which means basically, if you're fair and honest to yourself, there are very good chances that you will take the right decision. And that will eventually be appreciated. Even if some party becomes unhappy momentarily, they will still respect your decision. Having said this, let me give a few examples of actual examples that I have gone through. In my first I was assistant collector under training at Nanded. Then after that, my first regular job was as assistant collector Aurangabad in Marathwada. Aurangabad had a fair amount of educational institutions, and the educational institutions were run by different communities, so to say. For example, there was an Azad college or an Azad set of institutions which was run by the Muslim community in Aurangabad, because Aurangabad was part of the erstwhile Nizam state of Hyderabad. The entire, what we now call as Marathwada, Marathwada was a part of the erstwhile Nizam state of Hyderabad. So that is the history of that. So there was a set of educational institutions, the Azad College institutions. Then there was a set of institution called the Milind College, which was basically popular with the Dalits, because it was also a region where, coming under the influence of Dr. Ambedkar, a lot of people had become neo-Buddhists. And the Dalits, they were prominent in the Milind College of Institutions. And there was yet another set of institutions called the Saraswati Bhuvan College, which was, let us say, with the Brahmin community, or mostly with the upper caste. That was the setup of the colleges or students. Second is the students were politically active. Particularly, the college students were politically active. There were a few agitations going on. One of the agitations was the demand to rename Marathwada University as Dr. Ambedkar University, which had not been accepted during the time when I was assistant collector, but much later it did get accepted. That was the kind of situations. The lawyers were all very good, both in English and in Urdu. A good learned bar was there in Aurangabad. Now, an incident I like to say is, as an assistant collector, I'm also the subdivisional magistrate. So all the powers of the executive magistrates under the CRPC are vested in the SDM, the subdivisional magistrate. So one day late in the evening, perhaps around, we all work till quite late we don't follow a fixed office hour of 9 to 5 or something like that. So this was a little late, perhaps 5:30 or 6. A group of about 15-20 people under the leadership of a student leader, his name was Gangadhar Gade, came and met me in my office. And the demand was that the cops, somebody has been killed in the police station because of use of third degree, and then hurriedly that body has been buried. And these students demanded that they suspect mischief in that it is not a normal death. There are a lot of reasons to suspect the motives, and they came with a long kind of written application saying that I should not only inquire into it, but since the burial has taken place just about 4 hours before, I must give permission to exhume the body and have a new post-mortem done. Of course, along with this group of students, some police personnel had also come, because I suppose they must have done some agitation somewhere in the previous thing. So they were accompanied by a police inspector and 2-3 police constables. After hearing them out for about 15-20 minutes, I thought of it and immediately gave orders, exhume the body. Exhume the body, but I put some conditions that the body should be exhumed in the presence of 3 or 4 people, which this Millen College Students Union can nominate. Police will obviously be present. And the civil surgeon should nominate a doctor. Rather, at least 2 doctors. And then the body should be exhumed and taken for post-mortem, presumably a second post-mortem, because these allegations indicate the post-mortem reports have been cooked up. And the civil surgeon can decide who should remain, which should be the team of doctors which should do the post-mortem. That's all. I gave these orders. After that, to be very frank, I lost track of what happened to that case. I lost track of it. I didn't even know, because a lot of such petitions come, you get on busy with the other work. But the written order has been dictated, done. Now, during the time that I was assistant collector Aurangabad, part of the time coincided with the declaration of national emergency by Mrs. Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister of India at that time. And she had been convicted by the Allahabad High Court for corrupt electoral practices in an election petition filed by Mr. Raj Narayan. But instead of vacating her seat, there were also agitations going on under the leadership of Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan. But she imposed a national emergency under the Constitution on the advice of her law minister, who was a gentleman called Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray. So when emergency was imposed, things happened very fast. Instructions came to all districts to pick up a large number of people. There was somewhat similar to an act we have today called UAPA, Unauthorized Activities Prevention Act. There was an act at that time called MISA, Maintenance of Internal Security Act. And a lot of people were picked up under MISA. Amongst the people picked up was also Gangadhar Gade and another student leader called Mr. Shevgaonkar, both of whom had come in this petition. There were many others picked up. That's a different story. But as you know, the emergency lasted for a little less than 2 years, if I recall, and the emergency got over. When it got over, all these agitations recommenced, in particular the agitation to rename Marathwada University as Dr. Ambedkar University. And one evening, the Dalit Panthers, who were very strong in Aurangabad, they were also strong in places like Nagpur and various other districts. They had all organized a march on Vidhan Bhavan in Bombay when the assembly was to begin for a new session with this demand. These things normally happen, nothing to. But around 8:30 in the evening, one evening, unexpectedly, the station master of the Aurangabad railway station rang me up, saying, "Sir, I'm facing a problem. That is, my platforms are milling with people. Milling with people. There's not even an inch to move around. And they all want to go to Bombay, reach Bombay for tomorrow's morcha. And I'm expecting a train in about 15 minutes time. But if I let the train come in, the passengers who want to embark in Aurangabad will literally get crushed in a stampede." That was the. So immediate oral instructions to him was hold up the train, either in the previous platform or rather previous station, or if it has crossed the previous station, wherever you can stop it in the outer segment. And then I immediately got in touch with the police. And with the SP, we decided what is to be done. In fact, we decided to go to the central police station, both the SP, all this was on telephone. We reached the police station. And then we said, okay, we got to know the Dalit Panthers are organizing it. Then we said, let's call those Dalit leaders, let's sort it out. And I was sitting actually in the SP's office along with the SP. And when these leaders came, it included Gangadhar Gade and Shevgaonkar. The same people whom perhaps a year or two before that I had given them permission to exhume the body. And the moment they saw me, they said, "Sir, aap bataiye kya karna hai?" Then they explained, "We only want all our people to be able to reach Bombay. Then I told them, there are 4 trains which are going to go tonight. One is the Ajanta Express, another is the Ellora Express, and after that 2 passenger trains. But those days, you had to change at Manmad, because these are all meter gauge lines from Kachiguda to Manmad, meter gauge line in which these stations like Nanded, Aurangabad, etc. comes. And then you change at Manmad. So I said that we have checked up the timings with the station master, and these 2 trains people will reach. The first train reaches around 7:30, second at 9:30. The third and the 4th train, they will reach only by 11 or 11:30. A little late because the assembly session starts normally at 11 o'clock. But they agreed, the leaders agreed, okay, we will separate, we will decide first. And police was present, but without use of any force, without use of any lathi charge, the platform was clear. Under the leadership of Gangadhar Gade and Shevgaonkar. They went there, but they used twigs of trees to beat up people, saying that, come out, come out. We will decide who will go by train number 1, who will go by train number 2. They separated the crowd. And then we further requested them that first the train will come, your crowd should be outside, disembarking passengers should leave the station. Only after that, systematically, your people can enter. The only thing is, we told the station master and the ticket checkers, please don't do ticket checking now. Let ticket checking be done at the Bombay end. We don't want to create a problem here. The moral of the story is, these 2 leaders obviously felt that my decision to giving them permission to exhume the body was a fair decision. And that is true with all officers. The moment the population involved feel that you're fair, they will cooperate with you. They will go out of the way to cooperate with you. So this was the first example I wanted to give. A second example, at the start of today's conversation, I talked about this problems coming because you think no end of yourself. And I also belong to that category, because I had, by the grace of God and the circumstances of my family, I had a good education. I did my BSc Honours Physics and MSc Physics from St. Stephen's College in Delhi, which even now is considered as one of the best educational institutions in the country. And after that, I got a scholarship, a fellowship to go to Columbia. And I did a further degree called a MA degree. And the pure sciences, they give an MA. Only for engineering, they give an MS. Again in physics and mathematics. And I had the privilege of taking some of the courses from some of the Nobel Prize winners at Columbia. So I, at that age of mid-20s, I did think quite a lot about myself, that I having a superior educational background, etc., etc. And of course, the post of the magistracy at Aurangabad traditionally has a lot of authority. Whenever you're a magistrate, whether executive or judicial, there is a lot of authority associated with it. So this feeling in my mind matched with whatever was the job. But my next job was a CEO Zilla Parishad, Alibag. Ms. Ruchi Bhagat has joined PCGT today. She's from Alibag. I was CEO Zilla Parishad at Alibag from 1978 to 1980. In fact, after my tenure at Aurangabad was over, I went to Alibag. As CEO Zilla Parishad, you work with an elected body. The Zilla Parishad is an elected body. And I again spent about 2 years in Alibag. About the first 9 or 10 months was with a particular body, a kind of a Congress body. Then elections to the Zilla Parishad were held. And the remaining 1 year, 2 months or so, the Sheka Paksh came to power. Peasants and Workers Party was in power. And when the Peasants and Workers Party was in power, the president of my Zilla Parishad was a gentleman from Tezari village called Prabhakar Patil. He and his brother called Datta Patil was an MLA in the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly, and Prabhakar Patil was the president of the Zilla Parishad. They were outwardly very uncouth people. Like when I joined as CEO of the Zilla Parishad, the president as well as his brother, two of them barged into my chamber. I would have normally called on them after settling down, barged into my chamber. And the way they introduced themselves was, of course, they introduced themselves in Marathi, but they basically said, I am the president of Zilla Parishad and he's my brother. And we are the two people who slapped Mr. Antule at Vadkal Naka when he was smuggling such and such thing. This is the way they introduced themselves in a very bash fashion. I worked with him, but he had hardly any educational background. He was only 4th class pass. And very rough and, of course, spoke well in public, had oratory skills, but used a fair amount of unparliamentary language. So in the meetings of the Zilla Parishad, which is the entire body consisting of all the councillors, you sit on the stage with the president, the subject committee chairman, and the CEO Zilla Parishad also sits as the chief executive of the Zilla Parishad. So 1 or 2 meetings of the Zilla Parishad, I noticed that he can be quite rough, particularly when you disagree with him in the open meeting. So it took me a time, but within about 2 months, I realized that you need to form your own technology of handling this gentleman. After all, he's the president of the Zilla Parishad. And the Zilla Parishad has powers to get rid of you with a two-third majority resolution. That they can tell the state government, withdraw the CEO if they pass a resolution of with 2/3 majority against you. But within about 2 months, I realized how to handle it. Not only I realized on a one-on-one person, the person is listens to you very well, understands what you're saying. That his rough behavior is, no, I won't say it is for show. It is when a large number of people are there. But on a one-on-one basis, extremely well-meaning person. He knows his constituents, the district inside out. He belonged to the so-called Agri community, which is an important community in that district. Now let me do fast forward. So my relationship improved. I found the method of, keeping quiet in the big meeting. And then after the meeting, explaining to him that these decisions which you announced, I don't think are proper, with reasons. And in the next meeting, in the first item, confirmation of minutes, he will say that CEO has explained to me, and I'm convinced with his explanation, so we should change these decisions. After that, I further learned best is to discuss the agenda items in advance with him on a one-on-one basis. So things went on. Then during 1 year, which was obviously my second year there, must be 79, there was a huge pest attack. Alibag, or that area, Raigad district, is a district where the most important crop is paddy. So after the first monsoon rains, which normally used to occur in this area around 7th of June, with the monsoon setting in Kerala on 30th May, it used to enter the Konkan on 5th or 6th of May, and Bombay by about 7th of, sorry, not May, June. By 7th of June, it will hit Bombay. 5th or 6th of June, it used to hit the Konkan. So after the first round of rains, paddy is sowed, and then after another round of rains, at a suitable time, paddy has to be replanted. That is the paddy cultivation. And that is the most important crop in that area. That year, after the paddy had come to a good growth, there was a pest attack. An attack by a pest called the stem borer. In Marathi, it is called Kodkida. An attack of Kodkida in large areas of Alibag, Pen, Panvel, Uran, going right up to Mahad, Khalapur. This entire area, a massive attack of the stem borer. The stem borer, as the name suggests, bores through the stem of the paddy, eats away all the grain. Outward, everything will look nice. But when you harvest and thrash it, there'll be hardly any grains inside. You would have lost 80%. Much worse, after doing all that damage, the stem borer, which would have bored when it entered the so-called larval stage, goes back and becomes a pupa. That is, it goes into the pupal stage and remains in the stub of the paddy. Now, when such a thing happens, the only thing you can do is to remove the stubs and burn them. If you don't do that, they will remain in the pupal stage. And next time when you take some other crop, it will again become a larva and start doing the same damage. So after seeing this and understanding the problem, I rushed to Bombay, discussed the matter with the agricultural secretary in the government of Maharashtra, and then along with him discussed the matter with the agriculture minister, and then with the chief minister. Decision making in the Maharashtra government was very fast. I literally stayed in Mantralaya in Bombay for 2 days, and in 2 days came back with written orders, a scheme sanctioned by the government. The scheme was in 48 hours, I got a scheme approved on paper with money provided for it. The scheme was very simple. After the harvest, people should pluck out the stubs, and if they bring, let us say, 1 ton of stubs together at a central place for burning, it will be burnt and they'll be paid so much amount, the people who brought it out. So good scheme. Now how to implement? Now myself and Mr. Prabhakar Patil, for a period of 6 weeks, 7 days a week, we traveled together. Normally, either I will pick him up from his residence in Alibag, or he will pick me up from my residence in Alibag. We used to leave more or less half an hour after sunrise, have some very early breakfast, and leave by about 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And we used to travel in the same jeep with 2-3 jeeps following us, which will be the jeep containing the extension officer, some staff who has to do this muster roll and pay off the money as they bring. And then we used to go to a village, and Prabhakar Patil will call all the local people, assemble everybody with the help of the Gram Sevak and Talati, etc., and give a beautiful speech in about 20 minutes to half an hour, explaining why it is important for everybody to come out and do it. Because this is a pest. If you do it in your farm and your neighbor's farm doesn't do it, it's of no use. And because of his passionate speech, That's leadership. That's something which I could not have done. It's because of the leadership quality. And then people will come out after the entire thing is organized. We leave one jeep behind with the staff for that village. Now go on. And then we move on to the next village. Repeat the process. We used to cover sometimes 5 villages, sometimes 6 villages in a day. Somewhere in between, in one of the villages, we used to eat. And after sunset, you can't do any work because there are a lot of snakes, etc. in all those areas. You can't really work in the field after sunset. So at sunset, we normally, in the last village, again have dinner. And then, of course, you can drive. You drive back and come back home by about 9:30 or 10 in the night. Again, to start the same process, 6:30 next morning. 7 days a week for about 6 weeks. But during the time when we were traveling together in the Jeep, I learned as much from Mr. Prabhakar Patil as I could have learned, or what I thought I had learned from the Nobel laureates of physics at Columbia University. This man is only 4th class pass, but he's from the Peasants and Workers Party. So all his thinking was left of center, but he knew the works of M.N. Roy, the works of the great reformers in India, also the great reformers in Maharashtra. He knew a lot about education. He knew about the Right Section Sanstha. He could argue philosophical matters. He knew communism. He knew how the revolution happened in Russia. Everything he has learned by word of mouth, by discussing with his friends in the party or leaders. That was a fascinating kind of 6 weeks together with him. And that helped me as a human very much. I will say all these sharp corners of ego got settled. One of my greatest learning experiences was this time spent in close collaboration with my own president. Here is a double MA and a president who is 4th class pass, but marvelous. His knowledge of everything happening in the district. He told me the entire history of the district. He told me about what are called gaukis. He told me how the panchayats used to work during his grandparents' time. He told me how the Brahmins became absentee landlords in the Konkan. He told me about how this absentee landlordship and the people who went off to Bombay and Pune, what really happened. He told me about the history of how the Shekapaksh was born. I mean, no textbook, no course in political history or political science could have taught me as much as I learned from Prabhakar Patil, though the reason for our traveling together was Kodkida Nirmulan Yojana, to get rid of the stem borer. So I gave this example basically to say how important it is to remove that ego from your mind. Luckily, this happened to me when I was quite young. When I was CEO Zilla Parishad, it was 1978-79. So I was 31 years of age. So this transformation of Mr. V.P. Raja really took place when I was CEO Zilla Parishad, Alibag. I became a better human being. I learned the most important lesson that you can learn from every human being. And there are strengths in every human being. And that I'm not poo-pooing education. Education certainly does a purpose, but it can also be a kind of a propaganda. That is, education should not become to put you into a particular, what do you call, a shell, where you can really communicate only with a self-admiration group who have done things similar that you have done. Then you're lost out a lot. In fact, one of the greatest plus points in the civil service is you come in touch with kings, and you also come in touch with the absolutely downtrodden. And when you get accidentally a mentor like Prabhakar Patil, you realize the strength of that there is so much to learn from every human being. And in our own house, all these intergenerational conflicts, you must give a patient hearing to your grandmother also. There is a lot to learn from grandmothers who have never gone to school. So that is why I wanted to give this. Now, a third example, which is a more true, I don't see the earliers were less true. What I mean is a more difficult situation where I was being continuously pressurized was when I was collector at Satara. Actually, I joined as collector Satara when President's rule was imposed in Maharashtra. Mrs. Indira Gandhi split the Congress. In a session of the All India Congress Committee held, I think in I don't now remember, these say 69 parts. She had split the Congress from the so-called old guards and formed her own Congress called Congress I, that I'm the real Congress, Congress I. And then national elections had been held. Perhaps in 1979 or something like that, I'm telling from memory. In the national elections, the Congress under the leadership of Mrs. Indira Gandhi got a massive majority. Got a massive majority. And the old Congress, which used to be called as Congress URS, URS, because he was the president of the old Congress. And the old Congress had people like Morarji Desai, from Maharashtra, Yashwantrao Chavan. That group got defeated in the national elections. After that, using the mandate she got in the national elections, she dismissed all state governments which were with other parties, saying that the national mandate of the people indicates that we are the legitimate rulers. Now you can't do it. She imposed President's rule in 17 states. Now you can't do it because of what is called the Bommai judgment. That also came up as an opposition to this such a large number of President's rule being imposed. At that time, the Chief Minister of Maharashtra was Mr. Sharad Pawar. And the Sharad Pawar government got dismissed by Mrs. Indira Gandhi on the ground that the national mandate is in our favor. So it was not just Maharashtra, 17 states were dismissed and President's rule were imposed and fresh elections were ordered. It was after that a gentleman called A.N. Banerjee was appointed as the advisor to the governor. Maharashtra came into governor's role. And it was during that time that I was transferred from CEO Zilla Parishad to collector of Satara. And the moment I went as collector of Satara, the first job to be done was to conduct elections. So I conducted elections as a returning officer. I had conducted elections earlier in Aurangabad as returning officer for municipal council elections and etc. But here, as a regular returning officer, I conducted elections in Satara. And throughout Maharashtra, Congress I, under Mrs. Indira Gandhi, came to power, except in 2 districts. The 2 districts were Pune and Satara. In Pune and Satara, the Sharad Pawar group, or it's better to call them the Yashwantrao Chavan group, which was part of the old Congress, came back to power. Now, one of the persons who had got elected as an MLA was the president of the Satara Zilla Parishad. a gentleman called Chimanrao Kadam. Chimanrao Kadam had got elected as MLA, and under the rules of the government, under the rules applicable, an MLA cannot be a president of the Zilla Parishad. The moment you take oath of office as an MLA, you have to resign your seat as president of the Zilla Parishad. There is already a Zilla Parishad, which is a Congress U Zilla Parishad. That is a Zilla Parishad under the control of people like Sharad Pawar and Yashwantrao Chavan, and a gentleman called Kishan Veer, these people. There was a Zilla Parishad. The president tendered his resignation after taking oath of office as MLA in Bombay. Now, there's an act called the Maharashtra Zilla Parishad and Panchayat Samitis Act. Under the Maharashtra Zilla Parishad and Panchayat Samitis Act, when the seat of the president falls vacant, it is the duty of the collector to call a special meeting of the Zilla Parishad for the election of the president of the Zilla Parishad. So accordingly, I issued notice. There is a set procedure for it, saying that on such and such date, elections will be held for electing a new president of Zilla Parishad, and that meeting has to be presided over by the collector of the district. I think it requires a 15-day notice, etc. So I did all that and sent the notice under certificate of posting to all the members of the Zilla Parishad. Okay, all done, announced. 2-3 days after that, pressure started coming on. The state government after the state elections was a Congress I government. As I said, except for these 2 districts of Pune and Satara, all the other districts of Maharashtra had voted for the Indira Gandhi Congress. So it was that Indira Gandhi Congress which was in power in Maharashtra. First, I got a kind of a telephone call from the Minister Rural Development, because Zilla Parishads come under Rural Development, a gentleman called Baburao Kale, who belonged to Aurangabad, that Soegaon Taluka of Aurangabad near Ajanta Caves, bordering Jalgaon. He rang me up, spoke to me very nicely, and requested that can you postpone this election. By that time, I had my human relations have become good enough never to immediately say no to anything. I always develop this diplomatic answer. Let me look into it. Let me look into the legal position, and I'll let you know. Even though I had studied, so I could have answered not possible, but instead of answering not possible, I said, let me look into it. There is no provision under the Zilla Parishad. Once the collector issues a notice, the elections have to be held. The only thing is, on the day when the elections are held, if there is total pandemonium and a law and order problem, then you can postpone it by 24 hours. That's the only provision. Okay. So I didn't call back. I kept quiet. After 2 days, his office rang back saying, Minister wants to talk to you. Then I told him gently, sir, I've looked into all these provisions. Then 2 days after that, a lady called Mrs. Pramila Tai Chavan, who was the president of the Maharashtra Pradesh Congress Committee I. She belongs to Karad. She is the mother of Mr. Prithviraj Chavan, who much later became one of the chief ministers in Maharashtra. She visited Satara. She's an old respected lady. And she sent word, can you kindly come and see me? So I went, saw her in the circuit house, and then in a very, very sweet fashion, of course, she asked her others to leave. I was alone with her, and she said, you must do us a favor. You must postpone this election that you have called for the electing the new president of the Zilla Parishad. I again told her, let me look into it. And then the same evening, I went carrying a large number of books just for showing it off, and with the things flagged, and told her these are the provisions. I can't change the election date. Okay, she said, okay. Politicians were always very nice in those days. They never used harsh words or anything. She went back. Then after another 2 days, Mr. Abhay Singh Raje Bhosle, who was a minister, he was a minister of state home at that time, and he's from Satara. In fact, he belongs to the royal family of Satara. The ISAB was still alive, and I was collector at Satara. He rang me up. He was the district minister and the home minister, or the minister of state home. And he made the same request. Raja sir, can you postpone these elections? I said, Kaki has already talked to me 2 days ago, and this, and I explained to him on telephone why it can't be done. Then I decided that with this daily pressure, I decided to go on a long trip. Within district, you can do. And those days, there was no question of mobile phones. Even normal telephones were not available in a number of places. So I went to Patan, to a distant village in Patan for a few villages, and stayed in a very distant guest house, not in Koina, which is well connected, but in Patan district. And idea was to avoid these telephone calls. I knew that pressure is developing on this. But the pressure didn't stop. When I was camping in that guest house, a police sub-inspector comes on a motorcycle and said, Raja Sahab, there is a wireless message for you, for the collector. Because the method of communication is through police wireless. And the wireless message said that please get in touch with the rural development minister on telephone as soon as you can. So, okay, I got in touch with him from the police station and again told him gently. Then finally, so I resisted all the pressures. On the day of the election, the first half was 10 to 12 was the receipt of nomination papers of anybody who wants to be a president. Then 12 to 1 was scrutiny of nomination papers and putting the list of candidates who are going to contest the election of the president. And if election is required, elections will take place at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's only an election with about, I think, about 110 or 120 Zilla Parishad members. So the first half went through, and I had agreed to have lunch that day with the CEO of the Zilla Parishad at his house, since I was spending the whole day in the Zilla Parishad as presiding over this meeting. So after the first 2 steps were announced, and we were sure the person who was to get elected was a person called Lakshman Rao Jadhav, and he had majority vote of the Congress U. I came to the CEO's residence. I was having lunch. At that time, again, from the police station, a sub-inspector comes with a wireless message. And the wireless message read to the address to the collector, saying that you are hereby directed not to proceed with the elections scheduled for today afternoon and report with all papers on 4th September to Mantralaya. Now, that was one of the biggest ethical dilemmas that I faced. Such an order was absolutely illegal. Okay. I, in fact, stopped having lunch because I had finished about half lunch. I said, wait, this is now urgent. I left the lunch table, thought for about 5 minutes, then looked at these books, the Maharashtra Zilla Parishad and Panchayat Samitis Act. The first thought that came to me was, is this a fake or a fake wireless message? So I rang up Secretary, Rural Development Department. there was a lady who was Secretary Rural Development Department, another senior IAS officer. Her name was Malati Tambe Vaidya. She was also an extremely well-known badminton player during our younger days. So I got her on telephone and I told her, Madam, have you issued this message? I have received this message. I just want to counter check whether you have issued it or it is something bogus. She confirmed, I have issued it. I have issued it and we have the approval of the minister on the file. My second question was, I'm just repeating it, that you have issued it. Okay. My second question, Madam, what do you expect me to do? She said, I can't advise you on this. The only thing I can repeat is these instructions have been issued to you after obtaining approval of the minister on file. Time is around 1:15 or so, or 1:20. And I have to reconvene the meeting for the election at 3 o'clock. I looked through the books. This Maharashtra Zilla Parishad and Panchayat Samitis Act has a provision. I remember from memory, it was section 272, which says for all the purposes of this act, the collector will work under the superintendence and control of the divisional commissioner and the state government. And the election to the president of the Zilla Parishad was being conducted under the Maharashtra Zilla Parishad and Panchayat Samitis Act. So I have to work under the supervision of the divisional commissioner and the state government. And I am receiving written instructions from the state government, which has been confirmed by Secretary Rural Development Department, from whose department that wireless message has come. That was an ethical dilemma. Do I comply with it or do I ignore it? And when I asked the secretary on telephone, she said, on that I can't advise you. I can only repeat that we have issued these orders after obtaining the signature of the minister on the file. One of my earliest serious ethical dilemmas. But I can't postpone it because there is a meeting at 3 o'clock. Then luckily my mind worked. I said, I have to comply. Whether it is right or wrong, what happened to discipline? Government may have some information which you don't have. And the law clearly states you work under the superintendence and control of the state government. And we have, All India Services, we have what are called as conduct rules. And the conduct rules say that a member of the service will work to the best of his conscience, except while working on instructions from his official superior, which he should obtain in writing as soon as it is feasible. But here I obtained written instructions. So I decided I have to comply with it. But if I comply with it, I know the consequences is going to be a violent law and order problem. Because the same people had already organized a victory ceremony, a big public gathering, because they know Lakshman Rao Jadhav is going to get elected. So what I did was, from the CEO's residence, I rang up the superintendent of police and said, please come immediately to the CEO's residence. We have something very urgent. He came. I explained the situation. I said, we are going to have a Graves law and order problem. The SP was very quick. He rang up his DIG in Pune and asked for special forces. He explained there is going to be a massive law and order problem. So kindly send me at least 4 companies of the State Reserve Police. In the meantime, he withdrew a lot of policemen, made them wear helmets, and said, go to the Zilla Parishad and cordon it off. So by the time our meeting was to commence, actually only the local police, but kind of camouflaged with helmets, etc., were there. But SRP had left, some platoons of SRP had left Pune. From Pune to reach Satara takes 2 hours. And the SP only told me, delay as much as possible because I will not have sufficient force. Give me at least 2 hours. Otherwise, we'll get outnumbered if there's a law and order problem. So I went to the Zilla Parishad meeting. After the entire meeting was assembled, I said on instructions of the government of Maharashtra, which I will read out. Much like a suspense, I didn't announce because I was buying time. Then finally read out the instructions and then said, I'm adjourning the meeting. However, anybody who wants to meet, I'm going to go and sit in the CEO's room. You're welcome to come with your pleadings. But as far as this meeting is concerned, it is adjourned as without transacting business as per the written instructions of the government of Maharashtra. And I adjourned. By the time the SP had provided me sufficient police force for my personal security as well as the thing. And I went to the CEO's room. CEO, I permitted. Of course, they were all fuming. They came barging in, shouting slogans. Then I said, yes, whatever are grievances, I will hear. And I heard very patiently. What is in my mind was what the SP had told me. Give me time to get force. I don't have force to handle this. So after somebody has said, आपल्याला आणखीन काय म्हणायची आहेत का? आपल्याला आणखीन काय म्हणायची आहेत का? Actually, I was buying time. Finally, that was managed that way. And the victory procession for the person who would have been elected, Lakshman Rao Jadhav, a stage had been created away in the city. There they made an effigy of the collector, that is an effigy of Mr. V.P. Raja, and burnt it. So the victory procession was converted to an effigy burning. Okay. And then they called for Satara Bandh the next day in violation of a completely irregular thing that the collector has done. And I agree with them. Okay. What I did, obviously in the eyes of the people, was illegal. And in my own eyes was illegal. The ethical dilemma I was facing was, do I comply with what I know is an illegal order, but a written order coming from the state government, or do I disobey that order? In my wisdom, I decided to comply with it as a field officer, saying that discipline has to be maintained. But luckily, adrenaline flows when you're in this kind of situation. The same evening, I got a number of telephone calls. I got a telephone call from Mr. Sharad Pawar, who was in Pune, who was the former chief minister whose government had been dismissed by imposing precedence rule. I explained to Sharad Pawar on telephone the sequence of events that had happened. He only heard, didn't say anything. Then I took a initiative of my own. I said, now tomorrow Satara is going to burn. And more than that, I've only completed about 3 months or 3.5 months in Satara. It's extremely difficult for me to continue in the district if I have lost the trust of the people. So what I decided was, I will ring up Mr. Yashwant Rao Chavan. I had met Yashwant Rao Chavan a number of times because he used to visit. He was previously, that is, he was, a deputy prime minister. He used to visit Karad often, and I used to call on him. So I knew Yashwant Rao Chavan. So around 11 o'clock in the night, that's when the idea came to me. I telephoned Mr. Yashwant Rao Chavan in Delhi and narrated to him in English the entire sequence of events, including whatever I have just now told you, how the pressure was built up, how this, and why I took a decision to comply with it, because that is what the Section 272 of the Zilla Parishad and Panchayat Samitis Act say. He heard me out and said that, don't worry, there will not be any Satara Bandh tomorrow. I will talk to my leaders there in the district. I will talk to Sharad also, that is Sharad Pawar. And what I will tell them is that a small number, 4 or 5 of them will come and give you a representation. And I will say that this is not, there's no point having a protest against the collector. This ought to be a protest against the state government. So file a petition in the Bombay High Court. So I will advise them to go to the Bombay High Court, and I will instruct them that there should not be any more harassment of the collector and no Satara Bandh, etc. And leaders like Yashwantrao Chavan had that, not only quality, and he had, after making all that arrangements, I had rung him up and talked to him for about 15 minutes, 11 to 11:15 in the night. At 12:30, he rings me up back and tells me everything that he has done and said, don't worry at all. And if there is any problem, feel free to, contact me straight. And okay, I'd been called with all the papers on, I think, 4th of September or some date like that. I came to Mantralia, met the Rural Development Minister, Mr. Baburao Patil. And what did he say? He folded his hands and said, Collector Sahib, maaf kara, tumhala ami tras dila, pushkal tras dila. Then he explained to me, we had to tell the people there, our Karyakartes, that power has now changed. It is no longer with your Sahib. Your Sahib is Yashwantrao Chavan. That the entire power is now with Mrs. Gandhi. And he's at the rank and file, doesn't understand all these things. And when we do that, all those lower workers join our party. So Baburao Kale explained the process as to why they had to give me this trouble. But on the same day, a case is running in the Bombay High Court, where I had briefed the government pleader. I was getting reports. He said that we know the matter will go to court. So all we did was we asked 2-3 councillors to give us a letter that they had never received the notice about this election. And then on that I had written, please look into it until we satisfy this, the election should be postponed. On the basis of which the order has been given to you. So with those papers, no fault can lie on anybody. Of course, I think somebody called Deshmukh was the judge in the High Court before whose bench. He was very angry. He said the collector should be fined from his personal pocket. But the government pleader explained, under this provision, the collector has no choice. He has to comply with. Then the judge said, okay, I will fix the date for the next election. The date of the election of the president, Zilla Parishad. And the High Court fixed the date. And the elections were carried out as per the High Court fixed date after 15 days, etc., or 20 days. And the same Lakshman Rao Jadhav got elected. But this incident of what happened when I was collector at Satara, later on helped me a lot. Because this is watched by a number of people who don't know you. But the political class discusses it. That here is an officer with mettle. He didn't succumb. Yet he was. The reason it helped me a lot was much later. I did various services, then went to Delhi as Director Technical in the Ministry of Human Resource Development. That's when the some government fell and Chandrasekhar had become the Prime Minister of India. Chandrasekhar picked up Mr. Mohan Daria from Pune who was earlier a commerce minister with Mrs. Indira Gandhi. He was one of the few cabinet ministers who resigned after the imposition of emergency, saying, no, it was a wrong step. So I can't continue in your cabinet. And he went back to Pune and he was running an organization called Vanarai. The Pune people will know him, Mohan Daria. Chandrasekhar picked him up as the deputy chairman of the planning commission. And he went there. And Mr. Daria, and I was working as director technical in the Ministry of Human Resource Development. After Daria joined, I got a call from him saying, Mr. Raja, can you come and see me? Because tentatively, I have selected you to be my special assistant and personal secretary. I said, sir, I need to discuss it with the education secretary, Mr. Anil Borgia. He said, I have also talked to Mr. Anil Borgia. So come and see. And after that, of course, I joined as personal secretary, Mr. Daria. And Daria explained this incident. He said, we don't know each other, but I have observed how you conducted yourself when this incident. So this is what I will call as, I've gone into a fair amount of detail as a first major ethical dilemma that I faced as Collector Satara. After that, I have faced a number of ethical dilemmas, but I can't explain all of them, perhaps on some other occasion. But one thing I can tell you, after every ethical dilemma, I have become mentally stronger. And, and even today, my entire service, I've always been able to sleep. The most sleepless night I had was that night when I decided to talk to Mr. Yashwantrao Chavan, when they called a Satara Bandh the next day. So I think the time is already 6:17. So I will stop with these examples so that you get 15-20 minutes for questions. Thank you very much.
Good evening, sir. I'm given the questions. The questions are directed towards me, so I'll be asking those to you now. So we have a question from Mr. Priyansh. So it is very rare that a civil servant of IAS level connects with the public, and it often is found that they keep themselves limited to administrative fields. So what is that something that these few exceptions that are able to connect to the audience emotionally?
I have a feeling the most important years for an IAS officer are the times he spends in the district. In the district, if you want to do your job properly, you need to connect with the people. You need to. Whether as assistant collector or as CEO Zilla Parishad, like, could I have kept quiet as CEO Zilla Parishad when I find that the entire crops in my district, at least half the districts, are going to get destroyed because of Kodkida, because of the stem borer, which is going to affect the next sowing season also? Do I have an option of keeping quiet? I don't. I simply don't. So I will say that people who do the district postings well would have already learned the art of connecting with people. And that is also the reason why in the IAS, district postings are required qualifications, even for you to be considered for a Government of India posting. That is the weakness of a lateral entry. The entire idea, there is how officers are selected for policy making. The real job of an IAS officer at senior levels is policy making. But for that, you need field experience. You need to see how communities are. You should see how the poor are living, how the marginalized people are living, how the small and marginal farmers are living. What happened to the tenancy laws in the districts where I worked. Now, all that you learn every day. And I'm afraid people who have remained kind of in their offices and over-delegated these functions, only asking for reports, they will turn out to be not very efficient officers. But if you have done your district jobs, and I was in districts for 8 years, the first 8 years, and those were certainly the most valuable years, because that always comes back to your mind all the time. You can literally picture the people in front of you. I had spent time in 4 districts: Nanded, Aurangabad, Alibag, and Satara. Roughly 2 years each, or rather Nanded 1 year, the rest 2 year, 3 months, like that. All put together 8 years. The first 8 years of my service. Any other question?
Yes, sir, we have other questions. So we have a question, sir. Sir, as you mentioned that a judge decided the date for Zilla Parishad election. So was it the case of judicial activism? And if yes, then, sir, during your total service tenure, did you face judicial activism as one of the hindrances in rendering your service?
No, fixing the date for the Zilla Parishad election was not judicial activism, because after the pleadings of the government pleader, the judge saw through what has happened. So he didn't want to give any leeway for the party in power in Maharashtra, that is the Congress any more chance to play any mischief. So they decided that they will fix the date. They consulted me through the government pleader. They adjourned it and said, we'll consult the collector, tell us the laws and what dates will be convenient to him. I suggested 3-4 dates. Out of those 3-4 dates, but I didn't remain present in the court. I was in Mantralia, but I was in touch with the government pleader who was pleading on my behalf. And he was in touch with me on telephone. So he asked for a few dates. I gave him that these dates are fine. It will follow all the minimum requirements, etc. And the court fixed one of those dates. That is not judicial activism.
Thank you, sir. We also have some students who are keen to know what were the differences between preparation of IAS examinations earlier and now, and what tips would you like to give them, sir?
I don't know the present thing, because I wrote the exam in 1973 and 72, and the scheme of exam at that time used to be 3 compulsory papers. One was general English, another was an English essay, and third was general knowledge, in particular Gandhian studies. That was compulsory. I think 150 marks each. So all put together 150 marks. I did exceptionally well in the English essay. And I still remember they give 4 or 5 topics and you have to write a 3-hour essay only on one topic. And I still remember the topic on which I wrote an essay was, religions have often propagated themselves by means which are repugnant to the spirit of religion. And I still remember I got 132 or something out of 150, which was one of the highest marks in English essay. And the reason I could do it that well was, those were the days where, besides physics, I used to read a lot of philosophy. And my most favorite author used to be Bertrand Russell. So my English substantially improved thanks to an extremely wide reading of many of the works of Bertrand Russell. And then after that, there were 3 papers which you can choose from a large list, which are at the level of an undergraduate honors course. and I chose physics, philosophy, and European history. And then 2 higher papers at the postgraduate level, which I chose higher physics and higher philosophy, including epistemology. So totally you have to write 8 papers. Then depending on the marks you get, I think 3 or 4 times the number they require, they called for oral interview. And my oral interview was conducted by a team of, I think, 6 people, headed by one Mr. P.N. Hux, sir, who was the head of my interview board at that time. Today, I don't know the full scheme. The scheme has undergone some changes. In that, at the time when I took the exam, these higher papers, only people wanting the IAS and the Indian Foreign Service, only IAS and IFS needs to attend the, take the 2 higher papers. Other services need not take the 2 higher papers. Now it has become common for everybody. And there is also a language paper that is besides one Indian language. You have to know as a qualifying. It's not counted for totals, but you have to qualify in one of the Indian languages. Now, of course, the main papers can be written many Indian languages. I think something like 17 Indian languages. You can go to the UPSC website. You'll get the full syllabus. Can't hear you. You're muted.
My apologies, sir. Sir, with your permission, can we proceed with the formal vote of thanks?
Certainly.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So thank you, Raja, sir, for your kind words. It is my honor and privilege to propose a vote of thanks to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to everyone who took the time and effort to be here with us. It gives us great pleasure to have such an amazing audience. I would also like to mention some of our dignitaries without whom this event wouldn't have been possible today. The PCGT trustees, B.P. Raja sir himself, Julio Ribeiro sir, thank you for your progressive and constant support. Further, I would like to thank Chandrakala Joshi ma'am and Antara ma'am for their presence and support. Last but not the least, Mr. Shivam Jain Kakadia sir, who has been constantly there for us throughout the event. Further, I would like to thank you all. Also, I would like to invite you all to PCGT National Youth Parliament, which is going to happen in the coming week. And the registration is closed tomorrow. So the more information and the link would be provided in the chat box right now. Also, I request you all to fill the feedback form for this particular webinar today. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Feedback form link as well as the National Youth Parliament link in the chat box. So you all can refer to that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do I have permission to log out?
Yes, sir.
Certainly,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Good to hear you again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Guys, I've put the details of PCGT National Youth Parliament in the chat box. It will be also put in the PCGT group that we were added to. So I'll be sharing the feedback form right away.